A shell exploded near them, Mr. yelling poisonous gas. The soldiers quickly took up their gas masks. Lieutenant walks up to a recruit. Lieutenant told him, tomorrow you will never survive. It's just that he's going in the opposite direction, able to understand orders on a brutal battlefield, become the target of the enemy's attack. The sound of charged soldiers rushing desperately to the French positions. More is the soul under the bullet. After months of fighting, the German army can move an inch. Trench warfare got them deep in the mud. Tens of tons of behemoth. Let the Germans hold their heads and cry, flamethrower, bury the invaders forever in this ditch. Whole battlefield is full of corpses. I don't know how to describe such a tragedy. Is World War I cruelest battlefield on the Western Front. Battle is over. Dead soldiers stripped naked, unified packaging and sending to the workshop. They'll wash off the blood on it, then into the sewing machine so the bullet holes, because on a battlefield where supplies are tight, this is the most efficient way. Clothes will be worn by the next soldier like a cycle of life. Vacancy. Recruiters gave impassioned speeches. His rendering people are excited. Paul and his classmates were deeply moved and naively thought that as long as I went to the Western Front they can conquer Paris for honor and cross. He signed up for the army. After successfully passing all inspections, Paul received his uniform, but he found someone else's name written on the clothes. These are clothes ripped from soldiers. He asked if the recruiter made a mistake, but the man replied the garment was returned because it did not fit someone else's. Peel off the name tag. The ground is covered with nameplates. Every one of them is smiling. Victory seems to be at hand, but soon they will see the cruelty of war. On the way to the battlefield, their truck was pulled over by a doctor because of frontline casualties. More soldiers than go to war every day. Doctors need trucks to transport the wounded. Soldiers can only walk. Arrive at the battlefield. Their first mission, it is to clear the stagnant water in the ditch. Soldiers feel it's different than they thought. Everyone's hands are frozen. Experienced soldiers come and tell them, if it's cold, put your hands on your hips. Some recruits followed suit. Really useful. When on duty at night, Paul heard the voice of the wounded enemy not far away. This will be his first head on the battlefield, so aim decisively. Then pull the trigger. Sparks when shooting. It soon attracted the attention of the French army. Paul was shot. Fortunately, the helmet blocked the bullet for him. Experienced soldiers came to inquire about the situation. He told Paul, if you don't want to be shot, remember to move the position when shooting. Flares explode in the air. Two people are fascinated like watching fireworks. The next second, the bombing started on the other side. Everyone hid in the air raid shelter. Compared with the excitement before enlisting in the military, now they are more afraid, experienced soldier says. The gunfire will continue in a few minutes, followed by their infantry. This scares the recruits. With the shelling, a soldier wants to get out, just ran to the door, blown to pieces. The whole bomb shelter is also collapsing. Paul was dug out by them. Luckily he is alive. The lieutenant threw him a bag. This is the job after every fight. It is to collect the nameplates on the dead soldiers. Paul lifts his foot carefully. Under his feet is a piece of glasses that was crushed by him. He looked carefully. Walk forward quickly. A dead body with a broken leg lay on the ground. Paul stepped forward and carefully turned him over. When seeing this person, he froze. This is exactly the classmate who went to the battlefield together yesterday. He gently took off his friend's nameplate, helped him tidy up his clothes again. Sad and scared, he couldn't help crying. And the previous frenzy seemed a bit ridiculous. War deceived each of them. Military nameplates sent back from the battlefield. Thousands of such a large number of casualties has exceeded the capacity of the German army. Lieutenant can't take it anymore. He decided to report the casualties to his superiors. November 7. 1918, a thick list sent to Army High Command, trying to convince them to stop this endless war. Soon the German delegation went to Compiègne. Ceasefire negotiations with France, but any issues on the table are conditional. The representative of France handed over the documents directly. As soon as you sign, you agree to a truce. The Germans can't refuse anything. Due to the protracted war of attrition and the outbreak of domestic revolution, the German army can no longer afford war. They have 72 hours to consider. The war will continue until they sign, but the German generals at the front did not agree to a ceasefire. He sent all his troops to the front. On the one hand, they are negotiating peace. On the other hand, attacks continue. The commander ordered the soldiers to move. They rush desperately to the French positions, ultimately rely on mass tactics. They rush to the French positions, assassinate them in the trenches. Soon, the Germans took the position. The food in the kitchen caught their attention. Hungry soldier. There is nothing better than food. They put bread in their mouths. At this time, the whole table starts to shake. Soldiers all in the trenches, not very far. Dozens of behemoths are attacking them. This is the French Saint-Chamond assault tank. Soldiers desperately fired at tanks, but this kind of damage is useless. The position just captured was bombed. Tanks start rolling. The guns in the hands of the soldiers are still firing. Such a huge monster made the German army fearful. Is this the war they yearn for? Tanks chase the Germans and shoot. They are targeted. Seasoned veteran catches up, put grenades on tank tracks, and put them in the muzzle of a machine gun, but the French army came from behind, completely cut off the direction of German attack. Flamethrower kills all these invaders. Even if the captured German soldiers beg for mercy, kill them too. This scene scares Paul. The battlefield turned into ruins under the guns. Paul rolled into the bomb crater as he escaped. He fell to the ground, suspended animation, trying to dodge a shot, and a French soldier behind him is aiming at him. Suddenly, a shell exploded around him. Seeing this, Paul rushed over, afraid to keep him aside. Hear the man's painful gasp. Paul is struggling. Cover your ears tightly. See blood on hands. He nervously wiped it off with dirt. Man is not dead. Good. Paul has a tinge of mercy. He slowly crawled towards the man, bandaged his wound with gauze, but in the end he died. Paul saw his file, see pictures of man's wife and daughter. He knows he ruined a family. Pain and guilt made Paul tremble all over. That man is just a typist. Learned that the delegation was negotiating a ceasefire. Soldiers are very excited. They can go home right away. At last, Germany agrees to armistice, effective in 6 hours. That is, at 11 a.m. on November 11, 1918, will officially declare the end of World War I. When everyone is celebrating the end of the war, the general called all the soldiers, gave an impassioned speech, trying to convince these soldiers to keep fighting. He'll take more land by 11 o'clock. I heard there is still a war. Paul broke down. He fully understands them and the dead soldiers. They are all victims of this era. For soldiers tired of war, no one wants to go back to the front. But if a soldier refuses, killed directly. All the doctors in the hospital were also shot. Soldiers are forced to return to the front lines, under the command of the chief. Everyone was bayonet. 5 minutes to truce. Taking advantage of the fog, German army begins to attack. When French soldiers chatted leisurely, wait for the war to end. They are defenseless against the enemy. At this moment, French soldiers hear anomalies. The Germans flood the French. The battlefield is illuminated again by artillery fire. Fighting before the armistice. Soon, the Germans entered the trenches. They fought the French. Paul stuck in the mire. Just when you're about to suffocate, he hit a rock, hit that person. 2 people saw a pistol at the same time. During the scramble, they rolled into the dugout. When the two confront each other, a soldier emerges from behind. The bayonet was stabbed into Paul's body. Looking at Paul on the ground, soldier a little guilty. Then a bell rang outside. It's 11 o'clock. War is over. Paul stood up vigorously and walked outside. From blind fanaticism before preparing for war to a clear understanding of war. This is the lesson these young men paid for their blood. It's not just a human disaster. This is the tragedy of an era. The battle is over. Officers still give soldiers a badge, have him collect nameplates from dead soldiers. This time Paul is among them. He just represents one of thousands of young people. Since the outbreak of war in October 1914, the Germans on the Western Front were caught in trench warfare. Until the end of the war in November 1918, few changes have been made in frontline positions. More than 1.3 million soldiers died here. We reflect all the time, but the war never stops.